Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today at the Morphy auction house where we are taking a look at a big old Austro-Hungarian machine gun. This is a Schwarzlose and it is a 1907/12 that has been converted to 8mm Mauser by the Romanians in between World War I and World War II. They of course did this because Romania didn't use 8x50 Mannlicher, which is the cartridge that the Austro-Hungarians originally built these guns in. The Romanians had access to the guns, they wanted to use them more conveniently, and so they actually contracted with FN to do this conversion between the wars. And the most interesting part of it is that they actually lengthened the barrel, which meant they also lengthened the water jacket, and you can probably see it from there. They did that by welding a chunk into the middle of the existing jacket. One of the distinctive features of the original Schwarzloses is that they have really short barrels. It's like a 20-inch barrel, and it makes for, overall, a very compact machine gun. The Romanians wanted something a little bit longer to make better use of the ballistics of the 8mm Mauser cartridge. And by that time, people had figured out ways to work around all of the technical issues that had made them think that they really needed short barrels in the first place. Anyway, let's take a closer look up at this thing and a couple of the differences between the Romanian conversions and the original Schwarzloses. So like I said, the main difference is, or the most distinctive difference is here in the water jacket. If you want to extend the water jacket, you could make brand new ones, but of course you've got to make all of the attachment hardware out here to fit it to the gun. And all of the stuff out here, the front sight, the drain plugs, all of that. Not to mention the steam tube on the inside, the fill valve. So instead, it's much easier to take the short one, chop it here, extend it, weld in an extra piece of tube. You then have to just extend, or probably replace, the steam tube inside itself, but not any of the fittings at the ends. And presto, you've got a longer jacket to go with your longer barrel. Now they did continue to use this same really huge flash hider, which I can unscrew here. This does open up directly into the water jacket. So this would have had a watertight seal on it. One of the cool things about the Schwarzlose is that the barrel is fixed because this is a delayed blowback action. And so because the barrel's not reciprocating, sealing the front end of the water jacket is far simpler than on something like a Vickers or Maxim that's recoil operated and has a reciprocating barrel. The rear sights were changed out as part of this conversion because of course the 8x57 out of a longer barrel is going to perform dramatically differently than 8x50. And what's kind of interesting here is that they didn't just set up sights for one caliber. Well, one caliber, but not just one loading. If we look up close here, you'll see that there's one range dial, but it's got two sets of markings on it, which don't quite match up to each other. We have S, which is for Spitzer light ball, and SS, which is for schwer, or heavy Spitzer ball. So both of these were accepted loadings of 8mm Mauser. One is about 150 grain, the other is about 196 grain. And these guns were set up to be able to be sighted with either one. Now the Schwarzlose was manufactured all the way through the war, primarily by Steyr, and this is a 1918 production gun. And you can see the designation on the other side of the receiver here, Maschinengewehr Schwarzlose M7/12. The original pattern was 1907, they were updated in 1912, and then this one has been built using an original 0712 receiver and a parts kit from one of these Romanian rechambered and upgraded guns. So as best as I've been able to determine, the Romanians converted these guns between the war, but then they never actually used them, and they sat in storage, and eventually they were imported into the United States long after the war, still in really good condition, but they were imported after 1968, which meant they were not able to be registered as live functional guns. So there were about 100 of them, and they came into the US and were cut as parts kits, which means the conversion parts are all there, and they drop into original Austrian receivers just fine, but there aren't any original complete matching Romanian 8mm conversions around. So instead, what people did is they have guns like this that are original Austrian receivers, World War I era receivers, that then have parts kits built on them like this. So it's unfortunate that the guns had to be chopped for sure, but that puts a little bit of light into how they're found today. And for example, why on this one, most of the parts are in really excellent shape, but the receiver has a bunch of old pitting that's been refinished. That's because it's a much older receiver that came from a different gun than the parts kit. So obviously this is very unfortunate from a historical point of view, but from a shooter's point of view, it doesn't change the fact that this provides a much more accessible way to actually shoot a Schwarzlose. In addition to the new rear sight, the Romanian conversion also added these two brackets to the top cover. And while there isn't any documentation proving what their use is, it seems to be a pretty good bet that those are mounts for anti-aircraft sights. I've seen some suggestion that perhaps they did also make an optical sight, but I think anti-aircraft sights are much more likely. This rear one does have a screw in here that would allow for windage adjustment of whatever you put in it. This front one has a little divot to center and lock in whatever mounts in there. As far as I know, nobody has ever actually come up with a set of the anti-aircraft sights that fit in there, which is probably a result of when they came over from Romania, those just simply didn't make it along with the guns. In addition, the cartridge oiling system was dispensed with here. So this was originally the fill cover for the oil reservoir. It's got this kind of crusty old mesh basket to keep debris out. And that was originally considered an important element of the Schwarzlose. They had a pump assembly in the inside of the top cover. This long bracket here would actually be cycled back and forth by the action as the gun fired, and down here it would pump oil out of the reservoir and down into the feed block, or the feed system. Well, the hole that oil actually came out of was right here, and as you can see, that's been brazed up and no longer operates. This pump handle's been deactivated. It doesn't cycle either. These guns, the Romanians found, didn't actually need that lubrication, and that's something that's typically found with a lot of the early machine guns, the Italian guns as well, and in fact the Japanese guns, the Nambu light machine guns, were originally fitted with oil pads in the magazine loaders to lubricate the cartridges, and then later on it was found that that really wasn't necessary. So what makes this interesting, aside from its history of where it came from and the interwar use of old surplus machine guns, is actually the shootability for the collector, the shooter, the historian today. The problem with 8x50 Mannlicher is that it's really difficult to find ammunition. You pretty much have to make it yourself entirely. And I should point out, while it is 8x50 rimmed, which is the same as 8mm Lebel, in nomenclature, it's not the same case and they're not interchangeable. The actual case head is different. The profile of the case is different. Despite the fact that they're both 8x50 rimmed, they are in no way useful for interchanging. So in order to actually get one of these out and shoot it, a conversion to 8mm Mauser is extremely useful because 8mm Mauser ammo is really quite plentiful and easy to find. It's interesting that there is one other conversion of the Schwarzlose, or one other version of it, that is similarly useful for the modern shooter, and that is the guns that were actually purchased by Sweden. Sweden bought several hundred of these guns, designated them the model of 1914, and they're in 6.5mm Swedish, 6.5 by 55. And what's cool about that is that the bolt and the feed mechanism are basically just waiting to be converted to any of the other modern rimless cartridges that have the same case head as the 6.5 Swede. All you have to do is swap out a new barrel and it becomes much more easily shootable. So the 6.5 Swede internals have always been very popular with collectors who know about them and actually shoot their Schwarzloses. This 8x57mm conversion is kind of similar in that it makes the gun really eminently shootable. Your only other option really, is if you have a gun with 8x50 internals, it can be converted to 7.62x54 rimmed, the Russian cartridge. The bolt face requires just a little bit of opening up and then a new barrel, and the feed system actually works with 54 rimmed. The original 8x50 feed system works with 54 rimmed. So again, it's a kind of obscure gun. It's maybe a really obscure gun, but they made a lot of these things during the war. They saw good service during World War I, and they're very robust and reliable and mechanically really cool, interesting guns. It's a shame that they're as underappreciated as they are. Of course, if you would like to make it less underappreciated and pick this one up and take it out to do some shooting with yourself, it is of course coming up for sale here. If you check the description text down there below the video, you'll find a link to ForgottenWeapons.com, and from Forgotten Weapons you can follow a link over to the Morphy catalog page on this Schwarzlose and see all the cool stuff that comes with it, because there's a whole slew of spare parts, kits, springs, loading tool, or a belt loading machine for the Schwarzlose, which is a cool piece all by itself, the tripod of course, and then they have pictures of all that, description, price estimate, everything else you would need if you want to place a bid on it. So, thanks for watching.